Now, it's the kind of thing any parent would keel over if they heard their 14-year-old daughter was doing. But so there I was, riding around in the white van with this scraggly haired man selling stereo speakers.
Change isn't just coming, it's here, faster and more intense than ever. How will you adapt when technology shifts the ground beneath our feet? I'm David.
And I'm his brother Phil. And this is Whiplash Nation, where we explore the stories of people who've mastered the art of adaptation.
Hey Phil, it's great to be on our first inaugural episode of Whiplash Nation. We talked about this for a while, at least since the pandemic. We were so mystified by all of the technology that was coming into the market. Oh my God, I can't believe how fast things are moving. That's how we got here.
Yes.
The podcast, don't you think?
Yeah, I guess all of us are feeling whiplash. Not just technology is something that's definitely on the tip of the spear. It's just a pandemic and all of the different things that happened in society. On top of all of it, our lives have just changed. We got pulled through a shredder. It felt like. You think?
An interesting thing because I've been in technology for over 20 years. I didn't have a cell phone growing up, and now they're stuck to our head. Live video like this, like what we're doing right now, 15 years ago was amazing. And, now it's just commonplace. We've got a great lineup of people that we're going to bring on the show, but we decided to start with people we know. Like, I really enjoyed talking to Nancy, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah, Nancy, just full disclosure, Nancy is a friend of mine from down here in Baltimore. And she actually married my wife, Jess, and I.
Great wedding.
She's done everything.
Yeah, that's a good story of itself. Your wedding in an art gallery.
Yeah, that's a whole other show right there. She's faced change, adapted to change, and succeeded. A lot of times it seems like doomsday, like AI is going to take over everything, and we're all going to lose our jobs. And we just thought, let's find something that's positive. Let's find the stories that are positive. Let's put that out there.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to take a breath and look at what's actually happening with a level head. You can go there, and Nancy's a great example of it. I'm not even sure if I know the number of jobs that she's had. So we'll get into that when she bring her on. Here's a change agent, someone that's used to being in flux and flows. We really enjoyed the conversation. We hope you do too.
All right, let's go. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Nancy, I don't even know if I can count the number of jobs that you've had.
I've
the number
lost
of
count.
Careers. Yeah, it's just amazing. Like that is like a great way to start off this whole podcast. It's almost like an infomercial. It's like, but wait, there's more. And there's a long list of jobs from bartender, office manager. Yeah. The one I really want to know: celebrity impersonator, interior designer, birthday clown, actor, title coordinator, secretary, waitress, chauffeur, daycare owner, warehouse worker, minister, house cleaner, Tupperware salesperson, car salesperson, researcher, real estate agent, and mortgage lender. And now you went through real estate, but now you're a professor. So, that's a long
that's a lot,
breath after all those.
That's a lot.
I always like to start off with, how'd you get into your first job?
Well, it was the first job I ever had. I was 14 years old with a work permit, and I was not doing well in school. It's sort of one of these lost children. I was determined to get a job. So I set out immediately with all the confidence of a 14-year-old who has no clue what the world is like. And I just assumed the first place I went to, this place where these boys I had a massive crush on, worked, and I was always visiting them there. So I just assumed I'd go there, tell them I wanted a job and get one. But it didn't happen that way. In fact, I went through place after place after place, and I didn't get a job. But the whole time that I was, walking to the bus stop, taking the bus to these different places to apply for these jobs, there was this man about 40 years old, if I'm generous, riding around in a white van, pulling up beside me as I was walking down the street saying, "Hey, you want to buy a stereo speaker?" And I at first I chose some colorful language to tell him to get away, because unfortunately at 14 I had already had people approaching, in cars as I was walking down the street. So, but then the next day I was in a different part of town, and up rolls the white van with the scraggly haired 40-year-old man saying, "Hey, you want to buy a stereo speaker?" And again, I said, go away, go away. So this happened maybe about 4 times. through the course of my applying for all these jobs and getting disillusioned and getting like, oh gosh, I'm not ever going to get a job. And so it just occurred to me when he pulled up late at night when I was walking to one of my friends' houses and said, do you want to buy a stereo speaker? And I was like, this guy is actually selling stereo speakers. I knew it. And I turned around and I said to him, no, I don't want to buy a stereo speaker, but I want to learn how to sell a stereo speaker. So I'm going to meet you on Saturday at the Kmart parking lot, and I'm going to spend the day with you, and I'm going to sell stereo speakers with you. Now, it's the kind of thing any parent would keel over if they heard their 14-year-old daughter was doing. But my instinct told me it was, and I went. So there I was, riding around in the white van with this scraggly haired 40-year-old man selling stereo speakers. And, I sold a bunch and I learned a lot, and then I went my way. So that was my first job.
That's amazing. Like again, when you said white van, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
At a Kmart.
Yeah. It started in a Kmart parking lot. Yeah. And we had, and I assumed, like anybody who sees a white van, scraggly haired older man saying, you want to buy a stereo speaker? I assumed they were hot. I assumed they were stolen, but it turned out they were not stolen. It was a legitimate person, licensed, had everything he needed when the police pulled us over because they thought something was going wrong. He showed all of his licenses and his registrations, and the police were like, so sorry to bother you. First they said to me, you okay in there? I said, yep, I'm working. He was like, okay, sorry to bother you guys. And off we went.
That's amazing. So there was an actual electronics business that had a sales channel that he was probably supposed to be door to door, like the old vacuum salesman.
Yeah, but I think it was intentionally set up to look shady because they probably weren't the highest quality. And, I learned in sales, I learned so much about people. If people think it's stolen, they're not going to say, oh, my integrity won't let me buy a stolen product. They say, oh, if it's stolen, I'm going to get a good quality at a cheap price. And so that was how it was framed. It was like, and he never told anybody that they were stolen. He would say with a little wink, I never said anything about them being stolen.
That's amazing.
So that was a lesson too for me. It's like, he never said they were stolen. Everybody just assumed because they had their attachment to what he looked like in the van.
So I love that story. Tell me about the celebrity impersonator role.
I had one main gig and I had a couple of others. My main gig was Joan Rivers. I was at the time an actor, a full-time actor. That's how I was making my living. And so we had to take character jobs and things like that because they were the ones that paid the most. And there was this really great company that they had a Joan Rivers already, but I don't know, she tore her ACL or something the night before a show. And so I got a panicked call. I had a little bit of a reputation in the acting world as somebody who could just turn into somebody else. I was very comfortable being other people, not so comfortable being myself, but I was very comfortable being other people. So if you told me that I was going to be playing a Mexican man in a show, I would turn up as a Mexican man and would be believable. And I had this reputation. So when they panicked thinking we didn't have a Joan Rivers, they asked, everybody, do you know somebody? And it was Nancy came up. So they called me, and it was a great opportunity for me to get involved with this organization. My brother is very funny. He studies comedians. He's always been plugged into comedy. I knew he was into Joan Rivers, and I called him, and he came over and showed me the clap, and I don't know if you know Joan Rivers, but she had very distinctive things that she did. There was also a website that had her voice. It had all her jokes. And if you scrolled over the joke, you heard her voice reading it. So that was a gift for me because I was able to impersonate her voice. The trouble with Joan was that she was short and I was tall. So I had to kind of scrunch down to give the illusion of being a small woman. And so and I had to talk with her voice, which was raspy. And after an hour and a half of that, I was broken. I created this crazy overcoat to wear, and it was at the Hippodrome in Baltimore, and I was on the red carpet. The thing about Joan Rivers too is that she was obnoxious and loud and bawdy, and I have that tendency in me too. But she really had no filter at all. So it was giving me permission to have no filter, and boy, did I let fly. And the security guards were crying with laughter, and the audience, the people that were coming in were crying with laughter. And I just replaced their Joan Rivers and became the person they called for Joan Rivers from then on.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, if you look back at all the roles that you have, what was the biggest chunk of your career?
I had several jobs in real estate. I was a title closer. I was a mortgage lender. I was a real estate agent. And I was an auctioneer. So that did span the longest period of time for me.
And how did you get into that?
I was in a pub with a friend of mine. She was a title closer for a real estate attorney. I was a waitress, and I was, we were crying in our beer, literally. And I was saying, I'm never going to get out of waitressing. It's the only job that works. I was a single mom. It was the only job I can get. I was also a high school dropout. And she was complaining that the secretary at her office was horrible. And after 2 or 3 beers, we came up with that. As you do, you solve the world's problems. We came up with that answer. Oh, I should be your secretary. And we just sold it to the boss. I had lots of sales skills from that point because of starting with Charlie and his van. But Charlie
and the Van.
Charlie and the Van.
Is that the name of a TV show? I mean,
it should be, though, shouldn't it?
I love it. I love it. The name of your book is No Experience Necessary, Stories from a Life in the Works.
Right.
And based on that second part of that title, I think that's what you're talking about. It's the risk taking and finding. There's like a discovery process. But
exactly.
Do you think other people, even the risk adverse people, can learn from that?
Sure. I think knowing what your values are, right?
Yeah.
So there was a Saturday Night Live skit. I think it was called Coffee Talk. Do you remember Coffee Talk?
The Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman.
It was neither holy nor talk amongst yourselves. Didn't she, no matter who she was interviewing, didn't she end with, have you taken a look at yourself?
Yep.
Go home, take a good, long look at yourself. I was thinking, that's the key. Yeah. That's the key. You have to look at yourself and where have you been? What are you scared of? So I show this TED Talk to my students all the time. And it's this man talking about how we're all taught to plan and to have goals, to set goals for ourselves and to examine our goals and to think about our goals. But he was suggesting that before we do that part, we should be examining our fears, because it's our fears that are going to stop us from reaching our goals. So if we don't know what our fears are and we don't know our workarounds when those fears strike, then our goals are going to be kind of impotent without that self-knowledge. So we were talking about the jobs and how each one of them kind of teaches you a little bit more about yourself. And I'm not entirely sure where the point was, but I was thinking about my friend Diana, who I saw her in a restaurant at a Four Top. I've told Phil this story before, at a Four Top, and she was looking at this map of the world. And I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm planning for my future." And I thought about that, and I thought, when I plan for my future, I surround myself with the bills that I owe, and my plans are, my vision for the future is often rooted in fears, or it's rooted in, tradition, or it's rooted in what other people are expecting of me. So to get to a point where you understand why this job works for you and why this job doesn't work for you is to get an idea about what your values are. For me, there was always a realization at every single job I ever had. There was a moment where I realized this job's not for me. And the way that I lived my life, the minute I had that realization, I left the job. Just that's it. It's not for me. Not gonna work. It took me a minute to realize what was happening, and that what was happening was my spirit was telling me nope, and I was listening. And then it wasn't till later that I learned to put my spirit into the plan, and then that's when things started coming together to the profession I'm in now.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good transition, because your longest series of careers, if we put the 4 real estate jobs together, was in that point. Tell me a little bit about specifically that point where your spirit said, "Hey, it's time to go within real estate." Put me in that moment.
Sure. It was twofold. So my real estate career was mortgage lending and then real estate sales, right? So there were other jobs around those, but the bulk was mortgage lending, real estate sales. I knew mortgage lending almost immediately. I knew mortgage lending was going to be a problem for me because I was surrounded by people who they were people with a job and they were doing the job, but the job was structured in such a way that it was set up like a game. And the game was to get as much money as you can, and to do as much as you can. And it was really done in ways like there was a time they were giving away or selling these loans that were such dangerous loans for people who weren't really financially savvy, which is most of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But most of us in that office didn't think about the fact that these were dangerous because we were told if you sell these loans, you get $1,000 bonus for everyone you sell. And whoever sells the most is going to get a trip. You're going to get this award. And so we got in this game mode. I'm going to win. I'm going to get it. And we completely overlooked the fact that we were putting a lot of people in danger.
So like a Wolf of Wall Street type mentality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was only there for a short period of time because every time I came home from work, I felt like I needed to bathe because they were like, oh, someone doesn't speak English as a first language. I want them. Give them to me because I can sell them. You know what I mean? So it's like just no thought about what they were doing.
Yep.
And getting praised and glorified and rewarded for being that way. So, but I got there. I was there long enough to make the money I needed to make to get out of a pickle. And then I left and went into real estate sales. So that was the moment when I left them. But then real estate sales, that lasted for a while until in 2008, all the things that those mortgage lenders were doing back then, it all came to roost and the market, the bubble popped, the market tanked. Real estate was all completely toppled. And I found myself with 3 jobs in real estate and absolutely no work and absolutely no money. So I had to come up with another plan.
Yep. And then, so how did you figure that out? Like, was it the introspection, like we talked about, understanding your values and goals, or
yes,
going back to what
and
you really
it was 2 parts. The first part was I had to figure out what kind of a job I could get. And of course, when you're looking for a job you could get, you look to jobs you've already had, so that's where your experience is, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea of going back to a title company, which is how I got into real estate in the first place, was a horrifying idea to me. I didn't like the job. It was not good for my spirit. I worked for a toxic employer. So I didn't want to do it. So you use your experience that you already have, and then you use your contacts. So my circle of influence, my circle of connection, I just made a list of everybody I knew, and I called everybody I knew. And I said, you know me, you know what I do, you know how hard I work. Do you know anybody who's hiring? I was really just in that desperate place of, I need a job.
Help me. Yeah.
And I did get this job at this title company. And, because he knew I was desperate, he offered me very little money. And even though I was desperate, I said, no, I'm not going to take that money. And it was in that moment of saying, Nancy, you're in a desperate place. You're being offered a job. You're getting some money. The rationale is you should go for the job that gives you some money, that gives you something. And my spirit just said, you're going to get trapped. You're going to get caught and you're going to be in this loop of poverty forever. You're never going to get out of it. And so I said, no. But I said to him, I want to make sure that every experience we have is a positive one. So I guess I'm sort of going in different directions here, but I had a mission statement, and I had made a mission statement, a personal mission statement, not a professional mission statement.
Yeah.
And that was that I would use my experience, insight, and creativity to help other people find strength and faith in themselves. So I was like, well, how can I be on mission on this? Tell this guy, no, I'm not going to take his job, put myself in peril and still be on mission. And I thought, well, I can help him because I saw the stack of work that he needed somebody to do. He was not going to get to do it, and I can help him. So I said, I'll do this job for 2 weeks at your salary. You pay me this salary, I'll do it for 2 weeks, and we'll knock all those files out. I'll get rid of them all for you. And that way our experience will be a positive experience. You won't feel bad about me rejecting you. I won't feel bad about you offering me, it'll be a positive thing. So he was very appreciative of that. I went in and I did that. And after the 2 weeks, he came to me and he said, how much did you want to stay? Honestly, I think the mission statement is the key. There's a difference between a vision statement and a mission statement. A vision statement is when you plan your vision, where you want to be 5 years down the road and all that stuff. But if you don't know what your personal mission is, your vision could be empty. Your vision could be, kind of a hollow one. But for me, to do the mission statement, and I did it when I was like 20. I read a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it told me to do it, and I did, because I was always trying to learn how to be a human. And and I wrote it when I was when I was 20 or so, and it really hasn't changed. What do I want to contribute to the world and to my human family? What do I want my offering to be? And I thought my offering is going to be to help other people find strength and faith in themselves. So I wrote it. And so every job that I ever had, if I was waiting tables, I was like, okay, how can I be on mission? And like, for example, when I was working at a deli, I had, there were lots of people who came in the morning by themselves, drank coffee, sat for a long time, clearly disenfranchised in ways. And so I started this little club at the deli where anyone who sat at this table with other people would get their coffee for free. And then I would have puzzles at the table, and they'd work together on the puzzles. And it was just my way of trying to connect these people who seemed so disconnected. And it was a huge hit.
Another interesting part of your story that you had just mentioned was with the title job. So was it the mission that helped you say, even though you needed the money, you turned down the role because it wasn't a fit?
No, if he had given me enough money, I would have taken the role. I was needing to survive. But it was the mission that helped me ultimately get the job, to getting the job that I wanted. I was like, okay, I will take one more job that I don't want. I will set very strong boundaries. Boundaries are super important, because he was a toxic employer. And it was a job I was going to use until I got my degree and was qualified for the other job. The minute I graduated, and I mean, the minute I graduated, I quit, even though I didn't have another job. And I went right to the school that I wanted to work for. And I started pretending I already worked there. And I pretended I worked there for about, I want to say, close to a year, doing little odd jobs, doing adjunct work. But I just pretended I worked there full time. I did all the extra things that full-time workers did. And when it came time to apply for a job, I got it. And that's where I've been ever since.
And you had built the relationships. You had built the connections.
My whole focus then was to get in there.
You're acting as if you were acting as if when you did it. And I love the story. Just to go back for a second to the deli, you created opportunities where there were none, and you were just doing it at all times. You weren't doing it just related to a career that you were going to be in.
No, because it was the mission statement. The job was about paying bills, right? But when you can get your mission and your job to line up, that's when those things like flow that they talk about, happen. Is when your mission and your job are the same thing.
So looking back on all these jobs that you had, all the different types of careers, is there something unexpected? I use X from when I sold speakers, from when I was a clown, from when I
use it all in my career now. I use it all. I mean, I use sales, all the things that I use from all my sales jobs. I was an auctioneer, so I use standing up in front of people and talking fast. I do that in my classrooms all the time. I use all my creativity to come up with coursework. I use my acting to, and my clown work to be entertaining and funny for my students, to keep them engaged in things. The thing that surprised me through the course of all these jobs is other people. I've learned so much about other people and how they're so attached to their associations, like the white van and the scraggly haired guy in the white van has to be criminal activity. When I was a clown, I used to love doing normal non-clown things in my clown attire, like going and buying tampons at the store or something, and just watch people's brains implode as they tried to take my money and give me my change. People need things in their boxes. When I was an interior decorator, I remember I was brand new. I knew nothing about interior decorating. It was just a sales job, but I was called an interior decorator. The company was an interior design firm. People paid a lot of money for our services. And then I would have clients who knew more about the topic than I did. But because I had this label and I came from this company, she just gave all of her power away. Just all I did was stand there and not say anything. She said everything that she knew, everything that she did, everything she knew. And I just stood there and didn't say anything. And we had this moment of uncomfortable quiet. And then she said, but you're the expert, so you go ahead and you decide. And then I did what I planned to do anyway. So that was a really important thing for me to learn, that I have to make sure that I'm not just making associations and having expectations accordingly to that. So that was something I learned.
If you could go back to your earlier self or an earlier career, an earlier time, what was the advice that you would give yourself?
Well, the advice I gave myself back then was leap and the net will appear. It was sort of my mantra, leap and the net will appear. And so I did over and over and over again. I leapt and the net did appear. Sometimes, I bit the pavement before it got there, but it eventually came. I think now I might say, yes, as soon as your spirit informs you it's not where you want to be, leap in your mind, but take a minute to pack a chute. Because that last time that I leapt in my mind first, sat down and made my vision for where I was going to go, how long it was going to take me to get there. And I made the commitment to myself to say, okay, in this amount of time, I'm out, which made it easier for me to be in. And I also set very strong boundaries. A lot of times I quit jobs because other people were crossing boundaries and behaving badly. And rather than have those confrontations, I set boundaries and take a minute. Go ahead and quit in your mind and just find those steps that are going to get you where you need to be. And a vision statement, definitely your vision statement.
So the last thing we should probably talk about is the book. So describe it. What would
mostly without all the philosophy and instructional how-to things, it's mostly just anecdotal stories of all the jobs. So, there's the time that I decided to quit being a clown. Mostly it's me quitting all the jobs. The reason I quit being a clown, it had to do with getting very angry with a client. Nobody takes an angry clown seriously. So that was,
Can you write that down? That's another great title. It's just like Charlie in the van.
Right, exactly.
Charlie in the white van.
Exactly.
We'll have to remember that.
Exactly. And it's just the things that I learned about myself from each job and also about the world.
Yep. And it's going to lead you to other books named like Charlie and the White Van. And
nobody takes an angry clown seriously.
I mean, that is money maker. That title is awesome. Maybe you could have like an addendum to the book with the worksheets and the pencil. It's like nobody takes a clown seriously.
You might see it, David. You might see it one day.
That's amazing. I love that. Well, I definitely want to thank you for showing up and being on the inaugural podcast.
Thank you, Nancy.
And we'll see everyone on the next episode.
Okay. Thanks so much, guys, and good luck to you for your subsequent podcast, because I'm looking forward to hearing other people that you bring on.
All right. Thanks, Nancy.
Thanks, Nancy.
Nancy Murray is the author of the acclaimed memoir, One Child for Another, a second book, The Colors of Fear, a collection of poems, and her third book, No Experience Necessary, Stories from Life in the Works. You can find all things Nancy Murray at nancymurray.net, including her new book, Liminal Spaces. Our theme music was composed and performed by Michael Leventhal.